The sun was shining brilliantly on a spring morning in Islamabad, Pakistan. The city was alive with honking cars, motorbikes weaving through traffic, and students bustling with backpacks slung over their shoulders. It was the season of college trips, when universities organized tours to northern areas, lush valleys, snow-kissed peaks, and places where the worries of exams and assignments dissolved into the serenity of nature. Among the excited faces that morning were 5 close friends, all university students. Hassan, the natural leader of the group, loud and confident, always joking. Aisha, intelligent and sharp-tongued, the kind who believed science explained everything. Bilal, religious but quiet, who often kept his thoughts to himself. Sarah, cheerful and dreamy, eager to take pictures and post them online. Fahad, adventurous, the thrill-seeker who always craved the rush of danger. They had been planning this trip for weeks. Their bus was bound for Hunza Valley, an almost paradise-like destination in the north where emerald rivers cut through mountains and the sky at night glowed with endless stars. The group could hardly contain their excitement. But before stepping onto the bus, something happened. Something small that most would dismiss. An old man stood by the entrance of the bus terminal. His clothes were worn, his beard long and gray, and his eyes carried the kind of wisdom that comes from decades of seeing life and death pass before him. He raised his hand as if to stop them and said in a voice firm yet gentle, "Children, before you begin this journey, don't forget to pray. Say Bismillah. Ask Allah for protection. You never know what awaits you on the road." The students exchanged looks. Hassan laughed and brushed it off. "Uncle, don't worry. It's 2025. We have GPS, we have modern buses, we have seatbelts. Nothing's going to happen to us." Aisha smirked. Superstition. Science is what keeps us safe, not some prayer. Bilal, however, hesitated. He wanted to say something, but his friends were already moving. He quietly whispered Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim under his breath as he boarded. He didn't want to argue. The old man sighed. He looked up at the bus full of students laughing and cheering, music already blasting through portable speakers. His lips moved silently as he made a dua for them. Ya Allah, protect them from what they cannot see. The bus engine roared to life and the journey began. As the bus rolled out of the city, the excitement grew. Sarah took endless selfies and videos, capturing the morning sunlight bouncing off their smiling faces. Fahad hung out of the window, letting the wind rush past his face, shouting in exhilaration. Hassan was already cracking jokes loud enough for the entire bus to hear. Hours passed. The landscape shifted from the urban sprawl of Islamabad to winding mountain roads that snaked along cliffs and rivers. The Karakoram highway was both beautiful and dangerous. On one side, jagged rocks towered above, and on the other side, a sheer drop into the roaring Indus River. The students were lost in their own world. They laughed, they argued about what songs to play, they dreamed about the adventures waiting ahead. Yet, sitting quietly by the window, Bilal couldn't shake off the old man's words, "You never know what awaits you on the road." It echoed in his mind like a whisper he couldn't silence. He looked around the bus. Some students were sleeping, their heads leaning against windows. Others were eating snacks. The driver, a middle-aged man with weary eyes, hummed along with the music playing on the radio. Everything seemed fine, normal, safe. But Bilal knew from his upbringing that safety was never guaranteed. He had seen enough accidents on the news, enough sudden tragedies to know that life could change in the blink of an eye. Still, he stayed quiet. He didn't want to ruin the mood. Instead, he closed his eyes and silently recited Ayatul Kursi, asking Allah for protection, not just for himself, but for everyone on the bus. The road climbed higher into the mountains, where mist rolled over the peaks and the air grew thinner. The bus moved carefully along narrow stretches of highway, but the students didn't care. They trusted the machine, the driver, and their own youthful sense of invincibility. None of them could see what was waiting just around the next bend. This was the beginning of their journey, one that would soon turn from laughter to horror, from arrogance to humility. They had set off without prayer, dismissing it as an outdated tradition, but soon they would understand that prayer is not just about religion. It is about acknowledging that no matter how advanced the year 2025 has become, no human can control destiny. And destiny was already waiting for them up ahead. Early woke up early the next morning, still carrying the echoes of his mother's words in his heart. The air was cool, the sky faintly pink with the glow of dawn. He looked out of his window, feeling both nervous and excited. His bags were packed neatly, documents, clothes, and the little pouch his mother had given him, containing dates and Zamzam water. But most importantly, in that pouch, he carried his faith. Before leaving, Ali stood in front of the mirror. He saw a young man with ambition, determination, and a spark of nervousness in his eyes. "This is my moment," he whispered to himself. Then, remembering his mother's advice, he raised his hands and prayed, "O Allah, guide me, protect me on this journey, bring me back with success and safety." The family gathered at the door to bid him farewell. His mother hugged him tightly, whispering, "Never miss your prayers, and never forget who is in control." His father placed his hands on his shoulders, reminding him to stay focused and trust Allah in every step. His younger siblings clung to him, excited but teary-eyed. Finally, Ali stepped into the car that would take him to the airport. The road stretched long and busy, filled with the morning hustle of the city. As Ali looked out the window, he thought about the journey ahead. He had read about accidents, delays, and unexpected challenges that travelers often faced. A thought struck him. How many people rush into journeys without remembering to pray? How many forget that even a short trip requires the protection of the one who controls everything? The prayer he had just said gave him an odd sense of calm, as though a protective shield had been wrapped around him. At the airport, everything felt overwhelming. The buzz of travelers, the announcements echoing through the hall, the shuffle of suitcases on polished floors. It was a world of movement and uncertainty. Ali felt a momentary fear. He was stepping into something completely new, far from the comfort of his home and family. But then he remembered his prayer, and the fear softened. As he checked in and moved towards security, Ali noticed a man in front of him. He was in a hurry, restless, checking his phone constantly. He muttered under his breath about being late. Ali observed him closely. The man seemed worried, stressed, and distracted. Ali wondered, had he prayed before leaving? Had he taken even a moment to pause and ask for safety? Or was he relying only on his own planning? Ali smiled to himself, realizing that prayer was not just about asking for protection, it was also about surrendering control. He knew now that whatever happened, delays, difficulties, or smooth sailing, he had placed his trust in Allah. That realization gave him peace, even as the journey began. Inside the waiting area, Ali sat near a window, gazing at the planes parked outside. Huge machines, full of power, yet so fragile when faced with storms, malfunctions, or fate. He whispered to himself, "Even the strongest wings cannot fly without Allah's permission." Soon, the boarding announcement was made. Ali stood, collected his things, and walked towards the gate. He repeated his prayer silently, this time even more sincerely.
He realized that prayer was not only protection, but also strength for the heart. As he stepped into the plane, he felt as though he was not alone. Something unseen was walking beside him. The journey had begun, but deep in his heart, Ali knew the real story wasn't about reaching a destination. It was about what he would learn on the way and how prayer would shape his path.
The airport bustled with life that morning, glowing with the usual chaos of departures. Families hugged each other goodbye, businessmen tapped impatiently on their phones, and children clung to their parents' hands, eyes wide at the enormity of the planes outside the windows. For everyone there, it was a normal day. For everyone, except one. A man named Saif stood at gate 14, ticket in hand, bound for Dubai. He was dressed sharply, his leather bag neatly packed with documents, a few clothes, and a small gift wrapped carefully for his younger brother. To anyone passing by, he looked like every other traveler eager to board his flight. Yet, there was something different about him, an unease that gnawed quietly at the edges of his mind. The night before, his mother had begged him to delay the trip. She had pleaded with him to wait just a day, saying she felt a heaviness in her heart. "Son," she had whispered, her voice trembling, "pray before you leave. Promise me." Saif had smiled, brushing her worry aside as an old woman's superstition. He had muttered a rushed prayer out of habit, barely letting the words register in his heart. To him, life was too fast, too practical for pauses. When the boarding call echoed through the airport, Saif took one last glance at the terminal. Rows of strangers filed into the plane, their lives unknowingly tied together for the hours ahead. He followed, unaware that each step he took was carrying him closer, not to his destination, but to fate itself. The night stretched on endlessly, the highway stretching like a black ribbon across the barren desert. Rahim had been driving for hours now, his hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary, his eyes darting between the long stretch of road ahead and the reflection in the rearview mirror. Behind him, Ayand and Zoya lay half asleep, lulled by the hum of the engine, while the storm outside had faded into a calm drizzle. But Rahim's heart was not calm. Something gnawed at him. He remembered clearly how the storm had erupted earlier, how the thunder had rolled across the heavens like angry drums, how lightning had illuminated the sky with blinding fury. Yet when he recited the prayer, just as his father had taught him, the winds had softened, the rain had slowed, and a strange silence had followed. Was it coincidence, or had something larger been at play? The thought left him unsettled. Hours later, as they drove deeper into the desert, the horizon seemed to bend strangely. Ayan stirred, rubbing his eyes and looking out of the window. "Abu, are we lost?" he whispered. Rahim shook his head but did not answer. Zoya sat up too, her hair messy, and blinked toward the darkness. That was when she heard it. A voice. At first, faint, like the rustling of leaves in the distance, though there were no trees here, only sand. Then clearer, a whisper, calling her name. Zoya. She stiffened, her hands clutching her seatbelt. "Abu, did you hear that?" she asked, her voice trembling. Rahim frowned and glanced at her. "Hear what?" "The voice. It called me." Rahim's blood ran cold. His grip on the wheel tightened as his father's words rang in his ears. Sometimes the journey itself tests you. Not every path is empty, not every silence is pure. Pray, so that the whispers of the unseen cannot reach you. He slowed the car slightly, reciting verses under his breath, his lips trembling as he whispered words of protection. The desert outside seemed to listen, the sand stretching endlessly under the moonlight, each grain sparkling eerily like shards of glass. Ayaan, wide-eyed now, grabbed his sister's hand. "Don't listen to it," he said firmly, his voice shaking. But the whisper did not stop. It grew louder, closer. And now Rahim heard it too. Not just one voice, but many, overlapping, echoing inside the car though the windows were shut tight. They spoke in tones both sweet and sinister, offering comfort, yet laced with dread. Rahim pulled over abruptly, the tires screeching against the wet asphalt. He slammed the gear into park and shut his eyes, forcing his children to close theirs too. "Don't listen. Don't look. Just recite." His voice cracked but carried command. Together, in that car stranded on the lonely highway, the three of them prayed. Their voices trembled at first, but grew steadier, rising above the whispers until the unseen voices faded, dissolving into the night like mist at dawn. When Rahim finally opened his eyes, the desert looked unchanged. The stars blinked faintly above, the drizzle had stopped, and the road stretched ahead like it always had. Yet his heart knew the truth. That was no ordinary storm, no ordinary night. Something had tried to reach them. Something had tried to pull them astray, and only the prayer had kept them safe. As they continued their journey, Rahim realized this was no coincidence. His father had been right all along. Traveling was never just about distance. It was about faith, about the strength to shield yourself from what eyes could not see. But deep inside, he also knew something else. The whispers would return. The journey stretched on, with moments of laughter, prayer, and silence. The students grew closer with every mile, learning small things about one another that made them feel less like classmates and more like a family traveling together. But as the highway bent toward a stretch of wilderness, the sky began to darken, clouds gathering faster than anyone expected. The cheerful sunlight that had painted their path earlier was now swallowed by thick, restless clouds, their edges glowing silver against a fading horizon. Inside the bus, chatter continued, but whispers of unease started to circulate. The wind outside picked up, rocking the vehicle gently at first, then with greater force. The driver's hands tightened around the steering wheel, his eyes narrowing as the road ahead blurred with sheets of rain. The first thunderclap rolled across the sky like the growl of some great beast, shaking the younger students' confidence. A few of them reached instinctively for their prayer beads, others whispered quiet verses, and some simply stared out the foggy windows, their minds uncertain. It was then that their leader, the same young man who had encouraged them to pray before leaving, stood up again. His voice, though softer than before, carried through the tense atmosphere. "Do not fear. Storms come and go, but our prayer is stronger than any storm." The bus continued forward, rain lashing against its sides. Water streamed across the glass like tiny rivers, blurring the outside world into an ocean of gray. Yet inside, the students closed their eyes, repeating the prayer they had made before departing, asking once again for protection. The rhythmic sound of their voices drowned out the storm for a moment, wrapping the bus in a blanket of calm. And then it happened. Just as the road curved sharply near a steep drop, a massive branch, torn loose by the wind, came crashing down directly in front of the bus. The driver slammed the brakes, tires screeching on the wet surface. The students lurched forward in their seats, hearts pounding wildly. The bus came to a stop only a few feet from the edge of the cliff. Silence. For a long moment, None of them breathed. Outside, the storm still raged, but inside, every soul was suspended in the stillness of near disaster. Then, slowly, they realized the truth. They had been spared. The prayer that seemed so simple, so ordinary before, now felt like a shield that had stood between them and tragedy. Tears welled up in the eyes of several students, not from fear, but from overwhelming gratitude. They knew, deep inside, that if they had not taken that moment of prayer before their journey, things could have been much different. Some might have been injured, or worse, lost forever to the abyss below. The driver turned in his seat, his face pale yet calm. "I don't know how we stopped in time," he whispered, shaking his head. "The road was too wet. We should have slipped, but we didn't." His words carried no doubt. Something beyond his control had intervened. The leader looked at his friends and smiled through his own trembling. "Now you see why prayer is not just words. It is strength. It is safety. It is the unseen hand that holds us steady." The storm continued to rage outside, but the students no longer feared it. They sat in silence, reflecting on the miracle they had just witnessed. Each of them, in their heart, made a promise to never again underestimate the power of prayer before beginning anything, whether a journey, an exam, or a challenge in life. In that storm, on that dangerous road, they had not just been saved from harm, they had been given a lesson that would remain with them for life: to never take a step forward without remembering the one who controls every step.
The road had grown eerily silent. Clouds had gathered above, covering the once bright afternoon sun with a dull grey blanket. The bus rattled along the uneven track as though straining to reach its destination. And inside, the students had finally quieted down. Their laughter had been replaced by tired chatter, some heads resting against the windows, some lost in their phones. Only Adil remained alert, his gaze fixed on the horizon as though waiting for something unseen. A sudden shiver ran down his spine, unexplainable yet undeniable. He whispered the prayer once more under his breath, his lips moving silently. "Ya Allah, protect us." The words came naturally, almost like a reflex. His faith was not in the bus, not in the driver's skill, not in the strength of the tires gripping the road, but in the one who controlled everything beyond human sight. It was then that he noticed the driver's unusual behavior. The man had grown restless, tapping his fingers against the wheel, muttering curses at the traffic ahead. The road curved dangerously along a steep slope, the valley below falling deep into shadows. Suddenly, a heavy truck appeared from around the bend, speeding recklessly and cutting across their lane. A chorus of gasps erupted inside the bus, the students clutching their seats, their bodies bracing for the impact. But just before the truck drew close, the driver instinctively hit the brakes. The tires screeched, the bus swerved dangerously, yet miraculously, it stopped inches away from the truck's massive bumper. Heartbeats pounded loudly. Breathless gasps filled the air. For a long moment, no one spoke. "Achha hua brake time pe lag gaye," the driver muttered. He had no explanation for why he had reacted so quickly, no conscious reason for pressing the brakes when he did. But Adil knew. His prayer had been the silent shield around them. After the truck sped away, the bus resumed its journey, but the atmosphere inside had shifted. The students who had earlier teased Adil about his prayers now glanced at him with quiet respect. They didn't laugh anymore. They sat straighter, some whispering prayers themselves under their breath. A kind of reverent silence filled the bus, the kind that made everyone think deeply about life, about mortality, and about the unseen power that governed every second. One of the girls who had earlier giggled at Adil's seriousness leaned forward from her seat and asked softly, "Do you think that prayer really saved us?" Her eyes reflected both fear and curiosity. Adil looked her calmly and replied, "I don't think, I believe. Prayer isn't magic, it's surrender. When you pray, you admit that control isn't yours, and when you trust Allah, even accidents can turn into miracles." His words lingered in the air long after he said them. The bus moved forward, but in every heart something had changed. They all began to realize that life could end in a blink, and prayer was not just a ritual, it was armor, invisible yet unbreakable. As the bus wound its way further through the hills, thunder rumbled above. It was as if the heavens themselves were reminding them that safety didn't come from the road, the brakes, or even the driver, but from the mercy of Allah. For the first time, the students prayed together, whispering verses and supplications under their breath. And in that collective moment of humility, they felt peace settle over them, despite the storm brewing outside. That night would remain etched in their memories forever, not because of the danger they narrowly escaped, but because it was the first time they all truly understood why prayer mattered.
The morning after the terrifying storm, when the world outside seemed calmer yet still unsettled, the family and fellow passengers stepped out of the airport lounge with an unspoken heaviness. The fear of what had happened during the night lingered in their eyes. Broken branches and water puddles covered the ground, reminders of how close nature had come to ending lives. Among those people, Ayan's family carried a strange peace. The grandmother, frail yet radiant with serenity, held her prayer beads close. Her son-in-law looked at her with newfound respect, as though finally realizing that her devotion wasn't just a habit, but a shield, one that had safeguarded all of them. As they waited for a delayed bus to take them onward, whispers spread among the passengers. Some admitted they had seen flashes of lightning narrowly miss the terminal where people had taken shelter. Others confessed they had prayed desperately, even if they hadn't prayed in years. But the most striking confession came from the man who had mocked Ayan's grandmother the day before. His face was pale, his voice trembling, as he admitted to the crowd, "I laughed when she prayed for protection, but last night, when I thought we had all died, I found myself whispering the same words she said. And somehow we survived." The grandmother gave no triumph or prideful reply. Instead, she simply smiled, her lips moving silently in gratitude to the Almighty. Her silence spoke louder than words. It wasn't about winning an argument. It was about faith that did not waver, even when ridiculed. For Ayan, the experience was transformative. He had always respected his grandmother's faith, but until now it had seemed like something distant, something meant for older generations. Yet during those dark hours, he had felt his heart clinging to the prayers she taught him as if they were the only lifeline in an ocean of fear. The storm hadn't just shaken the earth outside, it had stirred his soul. As the bus finally arrived, the family climbed aboard, carrying not just their luggage, but a story that would remain etched into their lives forever. Ayan leaned against the window, watching the landscape roll by, trees bent by the storm, skies slowly clearing, the sun pushing through clouds. It felt symbolic, as if hope itself was breaking through despair. The grandmother gently placed her hand on his shoulder and whispered, "Remember, my son, life is full of journeys. Some will be safe, some dangerous. But every journey, no matter how small, begins with prayer. Not just for safety on the road, but for guidance in the road of life itself." Ayan nodded slowly, his heart filled with a determination he hadn't felt before. He promised himself that this lesson wouldn't be forgotten. He would carry it with him, not as a burden, but as a light. When they finally reached home, relatives rushed to greet them, relieved they were safe. The grandmother shared little of what had happened, only enough to let them know the journey had been difficult but blessed. Yet Ayan couldn't keep it inside. He told his cousins, his friends, and later even his classmates, "Always pray before traveling. You don't know how much it can protect you. I've seen it with my own eyes." Word spread quickly. turning their near tragedy into a tale of faith, resilience, and survival. For some, it was just a story, but for Ayan and his family, it was truth carved into memory. That night, as Ayan lay in bed, he replayed every moment of the storm. The fear, the lightning, the cries of people, and finally, the calm that came after prayer. He realized that prayer wasn't just about asking for protection. It was about surrendering to something greater, about finding courage when human strength faltered. And so the boy who once saw prayer as a ritual now saw it as a shield not only against storms of nature, but against storms of life itself.
The flight back home was quiet. Students sat in their seats, still carrying the weight of what had happened. No one was in the mood to talk loudly. No one was laughing or playing games on their phones as they had done at the start of the trip. Instead, many stared out the small airplane windows, lost in their thoughts, reflecting on how close they had come to tragedy. Ali sat by the window, watching the clouds drift by. His mind kept replaying the crash scene, the fire, the screams, the broken metal. But then another thought surfaced again and again, the moment he had prayed before leaving. He remembered how reluctant he had been, thinking it was unnecessary. Yet in the chaos of the crash, he felt something had protected him, something beyond logic and chance. That realization sent chills down his spine. When they finally landed, the students walked together into the airport. Their families were waiting, tears already streaming down their faces. Mothers hugged their children tightly, fathers held them with pride and relief, and siblings clung to them as though they might vanish if they let go. The reunion was emotional, filled with both gratitude and disbelief that their loved ones had survived something so terrifying. Ali's mother hugged him the longest. Her eyes were wet as she whispered into his ear, "I told you, never forget to pray before you travel. It's not just tradition, it's protection." He nodded, too overwhelmed to reply. For the first time, he understood her words not as superstition, but as truth. In the weeks that followed, the story of the students spread across their community. News channels covered the incident, calling it a miracle that so many had survived. But for those who had been there, they knew it wasn't just luck. Each of them carried a personal memory of the chaos, and each of them remembered that small prayer they had said before leaving. At school, the atmosphere changed. Students who once dismissed prayer as old-fashioned began to take it seriously. Before exams, before games, and especially before travel, they would pause, bow their heads, and whisper a short prayer. It wasn't about fear anymore, it was about respect for life and trust in something greater than themselves. Ali became somewhat of a quiet leader among them. Not because he gave speeches or forced anyone to believe, but because of the way he had transformed. He carried himself differently, more grateful, more thoughtful. People noticed that when he spoke, it wasn't to boast or to command, but to share the lessons he had learned the hard way. One day, standing in the school courtyard, surrounded by his classmates, Ali finally spoke up. "We thought praying was just words," he said softly, "but it's more than that. It's like carrying an invisible shield with you. You don't see it, but when the time comes, you'll know it's there." The group nodded silently, each one remembering their own moment of fear and survival. From that day onward, prayer was no longer something they brushed aside. It became a part of their lives, a reminder of the fragile line between life and death and of the unseen mercy that had carried them through. They realized that in a world full of uncertainty, prayer was not just tradition, it was their anchor. And so, the lesson was clear. Before every journey, no matter how small or how long, they would pause, bow their heads, and whisper a prayer. For they now understood that prayer was not just asking for safety, it was a shield, a promise, and a reminder
that they were never truly alone.
The city lights came into view just as the night was beginning to fade. Ahmad, still shaken but grateful beyond measure, looked out the bus window at the skyline of his destination. It was more than just a city to him now. It was a symbol of survival, of faith, of how fragile life could be when left unprotected. The accident had shaken him to the core, and though hours had passed since that terrifying moment, the memory was fresh in his mind. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the shattered vehicles, the frightened faces, and the reality of how close he had been to being part of the wreckage. As the bus finally came to a halt at the terminal, people began collecting their belongings. Some stretched with relief, happy the long trip was over. Others hurried out to meet their waiting families. Ahmad stood quietly for a moment, his hand still resting over the spot where his prayer beads sat in his pocket. He thought about his mother's trembling voice, the prayer she whispered, the way her words had wrapped around him like a shield. When he stepped off the bus, the cool morning breeze hit his face. It carried with it the scent of fresh rain and earth. Ahmad tilted his head back and whispered a soft prayer of thanks, his heart heavy but filled with peace. His journey had not just been about reaching a physical destination. It had been a journey of realization. Life, he understood now, was never guaranteed. No matter how much humans plan, no matter how careful they are, danger always lurks on the roads, in the skies, and in the waters. But prayer, true, sincere prayer, was not just about asking for safety. It was about acknowledging weakness, admitting dependence, and connecting with the Creator who controls every moment of existence. Later, when Ahmad reunited with his uncle and cousins, he shared the story of what had happened. Their eyes widened as he described the accident, the fear, and the miracle of survival. His uncle placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "This is why we never forget to pray before stepping out. You never know what awaits you." That night, when Ahmad lay in bed, his thoughts went back to the prayer his mother made. A simple dua had been the difference between life and death. He decided then that no journey of his life, big or small, would ever begin without a prayer. Whether it was walking to the market, traveling to another city, or someday flying across the world, he would always start with those sacred words. And so his journey ended with a promise that he would carry the lesson of faith, prayer, and gratitude, not just in his mind, but in his actions, for the rest of his life.